Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, president of Trident Concepts, and today I'm here with Brownells Daily Defense to talk to you about first aid. So, as we explore our concealed carry requirements and needs, the subject of first aid will probably be something that we need to talk about. And there's a lot of reasons why. There is, first of all, a general need to have some first aid knowledge. If you grew up in a household like me, I was probably covered in band-aids and scrapes and cuts all throughout my childhood. But as we start to move into this new scenario where potentially we could be either the victim of a gunshot wound or be present when somebody else is injured from a gunshot wound, it's important that we have a basic understanding of what we need to do. So when it comes to first aid, we kind of break it down in a couple different scenarios. First, can you apply self-aid? What if you are at the range by yourself? What if you went out to an austere location in the National Forest to go do some plinking? You're by yourself, there's no real way to call for help, or by the time help would get there, it might be too late. Can you administer first aid to yourself? The next one is buddy aid. You're with some folks and somebody else is the victim of a gunshot wound. Can you render first aid to that person? So one of the things that we talk about is only give out first aid to the level of skill that you have. If you don't know what you're doing, don't try to make it worse. So just know the very basics of first aid. Now, the other thing that we talk about is where is your first aid kit? So we have basically kind of like two theories here. One could be on our body. What I talk about with on body is, hey, if you go someplace where you can't carry a firearm, at the very least you should carry first aid equipment. You don't have to have an extensive first aid kit, but maybe at the very minimum a tourniquet and some sort of like battle dressing that you can put on to help stop the bleeding. Now, realize that there's some give and take there. That's taking up room on my body. Where am I going to carry it? How am I going to carry it? I get that, but remember that if you can't carry a gun, the next best thing is to be able to carry some sort of first aid kit. Then the next would be maybe nearby. Where might I store these first aid kits? Well, I probably have one in my home because I've probably run into a lot of accidents in my home. And then the second place might be in my vehicle. Might be a good idea to keep a first aid kit in my vehicle. Now, when we're talking about first aid, here we're being specific to the treatment of gunshot wounds. We're not talking about little boo-boos and maybe getting some aspirin. That's a completely separate type of subject. We're talking about strictly treating a gunshot wound. Now, for simplicity's sakes, we're going to talk about two different locations. We're going to talk about the torso and then the extremities. So if you have a gunshot wound to the torso, one of the things that you're going to need to start thinking about is to the torso, you're going to start thinking about some sort of battle dressing, some sort of dressing that you can place on the wound to help stop the bleeding and prevent bleeding from occurring. So when you are looking at some sort of like items to carry, whatever you're going to carry, you want to think, okay, this is going to be for the torso, for wounds to the torso. When I'm dealing with extremity wounds, that's where I'm going to start to look at tourniquets and applying a tourniquet. So after you have selected your equipment, when do you start to render aid? What I tell people is make sure it is safe as the caregiver to lend aid. So in other words, if it's still very chaotic, there's a lot of crazy going on, you might want to try to get control of all of that before you expose yourself to something unsafe. If the victim was shot accidentally, where did that round come from? Where's that firearm so that you can secure it so that nothing else happens? If you're out in a regular scenario, maybe you're out by yourself, the necessity to make sure that it's safe is probably not that big. But if you're around a group of people, that's where you really want to put some effort into trying to make sure that it is safe for you to go ahead and render aid. Then after that, just work within your skills. If you know how to use a tourniquet, great. If you know how to use a pressure dressing, battle dressing, great. But stay within your skill level. Don't try to do more than you can. There's plenty of subject matter material that we're going to cover about the use of these things, but for the most part, they are somewhat self-explanatory. The bottom line is that we have a responsibility for our own safety when we're handling firearms. and we plan for the best case scenario, but we need to also be prepared for the worst case. So being able to have some basic first aid equipment, know how to use that first aid equipment, and then think about what it means to use that first aid equipment in a real setting are going to be important subjects that you talk about. All right, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. Would love to hear any questions or comments. Please feel free to post them down below. Till then, take care and stay safe.